Basically every July I like to do a video on all my Apple devices, and so that is what this video is. I apologize for filming this at a slightly different angle than usual. This right here is my oldest Apple device, which is a Macintosh Plus from 1987. And I just have a System 6.0.2 floppy disk in here because these things don't even have internal hard drives, and this thing works just fine. The only problem I have with it is that, which isn't even with it, is that it has some missing keys and that its mouse is very hard to track, but otherwise it's fine. This right here is my formerly working Macintosh PowerBook 140 since it worked when I got it for this past Christmas. However, I booted it up today to film and it's now just been doing this. Now this right here is everything to the Macintosh Performer 475 that I used to have, except for the actual computer itself, because I got that computer back for Christmas of 2023. It never worked, so my dad and I took it to a repair shop. The repair shop said that it would take a while to get the parts because he had to order the parts from China. They apparently never showed up, and now the repair shop is closed, so as a result I have all the stuff that I can't use. I actually own a PowerBook 1400. I do have the accessory kit for it, which includes, I believe this is like a top cover that you can get for that. This right here is just some manuals. Yes, just some manuals. Some more manuals, Apple stickers, guide to Apple customer services. There's basically all this type of stuff, including some sealed software, some more software, sub CD. On the computers that finally boot. This right here is my iMac G3, which is the early 1999 revision that's in Tangerine. I do have its original keyboard right here. And this is the mouse that came with it. This is in some sort of Apple special mouse, although this is obviously not the original puck mouse that these came with. But if I go to, I apologize for, please pardon my dog's barking. But if I can actually, okay, right here, as you can tell, this computer runs macOS 8.6 and has 96 megabytes of RAM in it. Right here is one of my iBook G3 clamshells, and this is a 1999 variant, so this is Blueberry, and this computer works just fine, except for the fact when I initially booted this up, it just gave me 3 beeps, but then I booted it up again, it works. This right here runs macOS 9.1, and it has 65 megabytes of RAM, and this works just fine. So this right here is my iBook clamshell that is the Firewire variant, and this one is from 2000, and this one works great ever since I got its keyboard replaced. And I did upgrade this thing to macOS 10.4 Tiger, and I upgraded the RAM of this thing to the maximum 576 megabytes. And yeah, this thing works great now, and I got this thing for Christmas back in 2021. Right here is a late 2006 black MacBook with 2 gigabytes of RAM and a 120 gigabyte SSD, and this machine does work, with the exception being its screen, because when I was upgrading this thing to an SSD, in the process I managed to break its optical drive, which I have sitting in a bag in storage, and I managed to break this thing's screen in the process, although the screen is also already acting kind of finicky. So yeah, that is the status of this computer. I bought this thing for back in July of 2022 for around 70 bucks off of eBay. Because that my other black MacBook broke, my parents got me this late 2006 black MacBook for Christmas, which has its original hard drive in it. That's like 120 gigabytes and 2 gigabytes of RAM. I haven't really done much to this thing since I got it. This thing comes with all sorts of apps on it, and this thing runs macOS 10.6 Snow Leopard. Right here is my 2008 iMac, which does have its original 2 gigabytes of RAM and a hard drive, and runs macOS 10.7.5 Lion. And this thing does work, and my dad found this thing at an auction site back in July 2023, and I bought it from him for $70, and this thing works great now. Or I have a Mighty Mouse for it, which I got back in March 2023 for like $7. And I have a keyboard that I would have gotten this with this thing, which my dad found at a thrift shop back in August 2023. However, this keyboard just recently partially stopped working because its keys don't do anything. Some of them do, but most of them don't. And this thing does partially work still because my mouse is connected to it and it works. However, not all those keys work, so I have to use my iMac G3's keyboard with it most of the time in order for this thing to actually work. This right here is my white mid-2009 MacBook, which if I go into about this Mac, as you can tell, this has 4 gigabytes of RAM, and this has its original hard drive, which I can go into storage and check. Yeah, it says a 160 gigabyte hard drive in it, and I got this thing back in February 2024 off of eBay, and the reason why I bought this thing is because my first MacBook was just like this. However, that thing's logic board died, so I wanted a replacement unit, so I got this one, and this thing works great now, and I really like it. This right here is my mid-2009 MacBook Pro, which I got for Christmas back in 2022. And this thing works just fine. It has 4 gigabytes of RAM and 150 gigabyte SSD actually, but this thing works just fine except for the fact that its original battery apparently gave out, so I have to get that. So I'm probably need to replace this thing's battery. I should probably upgrade this thing's RAM while I'm at it. And because this computer is in such rough condition, it does have a small problem where the battery indicator on this side right here is so dented to the point where you can't press it to check its battery percentage. But otherwise, this machine works great. And here is my mid-2010 MacBook Pro, which I do have the original box for right here. And this thing is a 13-inch unit, and this thing works great, even though I replaced its battery in it, although this one is also not charging for some reason. And I put a 400 gigabyte SSD in it, 16 gigabytes of RAM. I got this thing back for Christmas 2020, and I actually used this computer as my main computer from January 2021 all the way up until August 2021 for school, and this thing works great. And I even have a macOS Catalina partition on it, which if I shut this thing down and hold the option key, I'll show you. Right now, as you can tell, except for the fact that this trackpad for some reason doesn't click now, this machine also runs macOS Catalina, which this right here is one of my mid-2012 MacBook Pros, just 15 inches, and has an i7 processor in it. And this thing had 8 gigabytes of RAM in it. However, I got this thing back in Christmas 2021, and it had some problems from the get-go, such as the fact that I could never get to properly go above macOS 10.12 Sierra. And I briefly tried to use this thing for schoolwork, however, eventually just gave out. So now this thing just has a deceased motherboard. I think I've harvested basically everything I can out of this computer. It still boots up, but it just shows this question mark sign on. It doesn't really matter that 2012 MacBook Pro doesn't work, because I have this mid-2012 MacBook Pro, which my father got somewhere back in November 2022, then gave to me as an early Christmas present. So this right here has an i7, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a 2 terabyte SSD, which was already all upgraded before I got this, by the way. And this thing works great, and I do have a macOS Mountain Lion partition, which I'll show you once. As you can tell, this computer also does run macOS 10.8 Lion, and this thing runs it really fast. This right here is my mid-2013 MacBook Air, which has failing graphics in it and a weird bug when you have to hold the power button down until the Apple logo comes up as you're booting up. But this thing runs macOS 10.8.5 Mountain Lion, or OS 10 technically. 4 gigabytes has 4 gigabytes of RAM and a 250 gigabyte SSD, and this thing works okay, but the failing graphics are a big deal breaker. And I was gifted this computer back in Christmas 2019 to have a semi-decent Mac. However, the problem was that because this thing has failing graphics, I could only use this thing as my main computer until August 2020. This is one of my early 2014 MacBook Airs, which is 11 inches. This machine does not work at all because I got this thing for Christmas 2021 and its logic board died, and so but because its SSD was still good, I harvested it and put it into my other one. And I also harvested some of the keys in this one to put on my other one, because that one had some missing keys. And this thing will make the macOS startup chime whenever I try to boot up, but then it won't do anything else. So this right here is my other early 2014 MacBook Air, which is also 11 inches. And this one actually does work fine now because I've harvested some parts out of it. And this thing runs macOS 10 Yosemite as an i5, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and 128 gigabytes of storage. And this machine works great now. And this computer was actually my daily Mac from February of 2022 up until March 2022, when I got one of the next computers you'll see. Right here is my early 2015 MacBook, which is a 12-inch MacBook that I bought on eBay just a month ago. This thing right here runs macOS 11 Big Sur, has 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I don't remember its storage, 250 gigabytes of storage. This right here is my mid-2015 MacBook Pro, which I got at a thrift store back in June of 2024, yes. And this thing has 8 gigabytes of RAM and an SSD of 120 gigabytes. And this is my 16-inch late 2019 MacBook Pro, which if I go to about this Mac, As you can tell, this thing runs macOS Sonoma. It has an Intel Core i9, basic Intel graphics, and I used to use this thing as my main computer from March 2022 until December 2023 because I got this thing for my birthday back then, because I have these two boxes. One of these is for my mom's and one of these is for mine. I don't know which is which since they're both so similar. The final Mac that I'll showcase is my Space Black late 2023 M3 Pro MacBook Pro, which is my main computer that I've been using since December of 2023, and this has 18 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte of storage, and I have the original box for this too. In terms of other Mac software that I haven't shown already, this right here is my Macintosh System Tools 6.0 disk, and this right here is just some other system disks. And then this right here is my macOS 10.3 Panther installation set disks. These are my 10.4 Tiger installation disks without PowerPC CD only. And this right here is my macOS 10 Snow Leopard disk. My box tower to show this, but I also have the box for my original Snow Leopard installation disc and my Panther disc. My Panther disc I bought back in 2022 to install my Indigo iBook, and my Snow Leopard disc I bought back in June 2022 to install a 2006 MacBook Pro that I no longer have. The iPads and Apple Newtons. This is my Newton Message Pad 120, which is from either between 1993 and 1997. I can't remember a specific year, but this thing works totally fine. Obviously the batteries in here don't work anymore, but that's that. And if I unplug that and plug in my Newton Message Pad 2000, which I also don't remember the year of, but this one also works. Moving on to the far more successful iPad, this right here is one of my first generation iPads that has an expanding battery and used to boot loop. I got this back in February 2020 from one of my mom's friends, and I've never had it working. So there's that. I need to get a new battery for this thing. But I haven't really prioritized that since I have two other working first generation iPads. So this one right here is a cellular unit in very rough condition that I got for Christmas back in 2020, and a whole bunch of other iOS devices that runs iOS 3.2 alongside the original smart case that you could get with the first generation iPad that I actually got with the one that was boot looping. If I take it, the Apple sticker was just put on here, it wasn't included. This right here is my other first generation iPad. That was actually the first device I intentionally got for my collection that my mom got for me back in February of 2019. And this unit I have also downgraded to iOS 4.2.1. This right here is my iPad 2 that I got for my 11th birthday back in March 2019. And this unit works just fine, except for the fact that its home button tends to be a little finicky. But if I go to About, as you can tell, it runs iOS 6.1.3. From 2012, this is my iPad 3rd generation that, although in very beat up condition, I got this for my 6th birthday all the way back in March 2014 and used this as my main iPad from March 2014 all the way until December of 2016. And this unit, even though I did update all the way back to iOS 9.3.5, I've since downgraded back to 8.4.1, and it's a 16 gigabyte unit. And as you can tell by Cool Booter, this thing is dual booted to iOS 5.1. This right here is a 16 gigabyte Wi-Fi iPad 4th generation also from 2012 that I did get for my 11th birthday back in March 2019. However, this thing hasn't worked since 2020. Moving on to the working iPad 4th generation. This one right here I got for my 14th birthday back in March 2022. And this one also works just fine. I have this dual boot to iOS 6.1.3. And this one I also downgraded to 8.4.1, and it is, I believe, a 16 gigabyte unit. Moving on to the iPad minis. This right here is my iPad mini 1 that runs iOS 7.0.2. which I'll show you in this 16 gigabytes, but I actually got this all the way back in December of 2012 for Christmas because I wanted an iPad mini, and so I got one. This is actually the Apple product that I've had for the longest that I still have. This right here is my iPad mini 2 from 2013 that I got for Christmas back in 2016 as one of my iPads to replace my iPad 3, 3rd generation. And this unit I have jailbroken. I did have to restore this. I tried downgrading this to iOS 10.3.3. I've never gotten it to work. Okay, I checked the file system and thinking this was running iOS 7.1 to to try to get the downgrade to work, since on iOS 7.1 it would update to 10.3.3. However, didn't have success with that. So yeah, this, as you can tell by the home screen, this does run iOS 12. Moving on to the iPad Air. This right here is my iPad Air first generation that I got for Christmas back in 2016. Or that iPad Mini 2 is 32 gigabytes, by the way. This is an iPad Air 1 that I got for Christmas back in 2016, all alongside my iPad Mini 2. This was my main iPad from December of 2016 all the way up until September 2019, when after this thing shattered so badly to the point where it wasn't really usable. So I finally did get screen replaced with an iPad 5th generation LCD, which is how come the colors look a little bit off. But if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell right here, this one runs iOS 12.4, and I haven't updated it since then. Moving on, this right here is my iPad Mini 3 that I got for my 16th birthday back in March 2024. And this one right here is just a basic iPad Mini 3 that is cellular, and I believe this is a 128 GB variant. The iPad Air 2 is 32 gigabytes. This is, I believe, a 128 gigabyte iPad. Intel runs iOS 12.5.7. This right here is an iPad Air 2 that I got off eBay back in July of 2023 for $80. And this thing is a very special unit, because even though this is sadly a 16 gigabyte unit, yes, runs iOS 10.3.3. This right here is an iPad Mini 4 that I also got for my 16th birthday in March 2024. And this unit right here is also 128 gigabytes. And if I go into about, as you can tell, yeah, it's 128 gigabytes and runs iPadOS 15.8. I got this iPad Pro now at 7 inches for Christmas back in 2019, and I use this as one of my main iPads. Got this smart keyboard for it as for my 14th birthday back in March 2022. As you can tell, this is a 32 gigabyte unit running iPadOS 15.4.1. I used this thing up until May 2022 when I got one of the other iPads, you'll see. This right here is an iPad 5th generation that I got for Christmas back in 2024. And as you can tell, this thing runs iPadOS 16.7.10 and works just fine. This is a cellular unit, by the way. This right here is a, I believe, 32 gigabyte iPad 6th generation that runs iPadOS 17, whatever the latest version is. As Intel runs iPadOS 17.7.5 and is a 128 gigabyte unit. I got this all the way back for Christmas 2019 alongside my iPad Pro at 7 inches, and I got the keyboard for this back in Christmas 2020. And this is an iPad 7th generation that's 32 gigabytes. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this runs iPadOS 13.1.1. This was my main iPad until May 2022. This right here is the iPad 9th generation that my school loans out to me. So it's technically not mine, but I still use it during the school years. And right here, as you can tell, this is an iPad 9th generation that runs iPadOS 18.6 and is 64 gigabytes. This was my main iPad from May 2022 up until October 2024. And this is my iPad Air 5th generation that is blue, as you can tell. It's in kind of rough condition on the sides, but still in not bad condition. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, it runs iPadOS 15.4 and is 64 gigabytes. The final iPad I have, which I also have an Apple Pencil Pro for, is of course, my main iPad Mini 7 that I got back in October 2024. As you can tell, going into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is technically an iPad Mini 7th generation. It's the A17 Pro that runs iPadOS 18.0 and is a 128 gigabyte model. And flip over the back, as you can tell, it is a sky blue variant. The boxes, this right here is the box to my iPad 7th generation's keyboard, and that right there is the box to my Message Pad 120. And moving over here, these right here are all my iPad boxes, including for my 3rd generation, 4th generation, or no, those are just random boxes. Those aren't units. I have a random iPad Mini 3 box, the Smart Keyboard Folio box, my iPad Air 5's keyboard, my iPad Mini 7 box, my Pro 9 7-inch box. I have 7th generation box, the box to my mom's 2020 iPad Pro, the box to my iPad Air 5, and that is the box to my grandmother's iPad 10th generation. Another iPad accessory I forgot to mention earlier is that I do have these two iPad keyboard docks that I got for my 16th birthday. As you can tell, if I type on my iPad 2, this one works, and if I type on my iPad 3rd generation, this one also works. On the audio products, which includes my iPods and AirPods and Beats. Starting off with the iPods, This right here is my iPod first generation, which I got off of eBay back last August for around $200, and this one works great. If I go into settings and about, as you can tell, this is a 5GB unit with 64 songs. This right here is my iPod third generation from 2003, which also works great. I got this for my 15th birthday back in March 2023. And if I go into settings, about, as you can tell, this is 3,191 songs, and this is a 30GB variant. This right here is my iPod Video, aka 5th generation, that I do have the original box to. This does work. It's just flat, okay? This does work, and this doesn't have any music on it or anything, since it did have music on it when I got it for Christmas back in 2023. However, my mom made me erase it because it had a pornographic video on it. This right here is my iPod 5.5 that I also got for Christmas back in 2023, and this unit has a screen protector on it, and this one also works great. And if I go into settings, about, as you can tell, it's just an 8GB unit without anything on it. This right here is an iPod Classic 6th generation that is 120GB that I got back in Christmas 2020, and this one also works great. And if I go into settings, about, as you can tell, this has 111GB free because it basically has nothing on it. Yeah, so it works great, and it's silver. Moving on to my final iPod Classic. This one I got from one of my dad's friends back in February 2023, and it came with an expanding battery, and I tried to replace it in a video. However, because these things are infamously hard to get open, I failed, and this is an 8GB unit. And so this unit, although I believe it technically does work, I just can't really power it on because it's obviously not safe to try to. Moving on to the iPod minis. I have this iPod mini generation right here, which I got this unit back in July 2019 off EA, and it's 4GB. And this unit sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. I don't know what's wrong with this thing. It's clicking like it wants to turn on, but it just isn't doing anything on screen, so I don't know what's up with that. This right here, I also got from one of my dad's friends. This right here is his old iPod mini first generation. This unit does work, but only when plugged in because its battery is completely shot. This right here is an iPod mini second generation, which was also just on, but it's not apparently. But this unit I got for last Christmas back in 2024. And this unit has been modified to have a 256GB SD card inside as its main source of storage. And this iPod mini second generation, it has a dented aluminum that happened back in 2020. But this unit I got back in September of 2019. There we go, I guess. Yeah, this unit does also work, just that batteries in these iPods have a tendency to get shot. And I also have these two iPod mini clips. One of these I got from my friend's iPod mini, and then one of these I got from my iPod mini second generation. They are both official Apple accessories, and they both work. Moving on to the iPod shuffles. This right here is my iPod shuffle first generation, which does work, but only when plugged in because its battery is also shot. And then I have these three iPod shuffle second generations. This first one is my mom's old one, and this one does work, as you can tell. And this right here is my grandfather's old iPod shuffle second generation, which this one did at least used to work. I don't know if it still works or not, but I also might just need to charge this thing more. This right here is my dad's old iPod shuffle second generation, which this thing, the last I checked, does not work. This may work when plugged in, I don't know. And then this right here is my iPod shuffle fourth generation, which this is my dad's old unit that I got back in 2012. And this one no longer works when plugged in because its battery is also shot. Moving on to the iPod Nanos. This right here is my iPod Nano first generation that I got in a lot of iPods back in October 2020. And this unit does work just as a cracked front. And this is 1GB. And this is also flat. Battery does work. This thing does work normally though. This right here is my iPod Nano second generation that I got for Christmas back in 2020, and this one works just fine ever since I restored it because I had a passcode on it. And if I go into settings and about, as you can tell, this is a 4GB unit with nothing on it. This right here is one of the iPod Nano second generations that I got for Christmas back in 2019. This one doesn't really work because its screen comes on but then doesn't show anything. And then this one has the same exact issue, except this one's also right. I also got this for Christmas back in 2019. This right here is an iPod Nano third generation that I got from one of my mom's friends, and this one works. It's 8GB. And if I go into settings, as you can tell, it has 402 songs on it. And then this right here is my iPod Nano third generation that I've had since May 2019. That was my first non-touch iPod, and this one has developed a black spot, which is code for an expanding battery. So someday if I learn how to solder, I might try to replace this, but it's not on the top priority right now because I have other things I need to focus on in terms of money. This right here is my iPod Nano 6th generation, which this unit I got at a thrift store back in February of 2022. And this one works great. And if I go into settings and about, as you can tell, it has 88 songs, and this is an 8GB unit. Works great. This right here is an iPod Nano 7th generation that I also got at a thrift store for, and I think I paid around $120 for it, which was normal for these back then, although it was a little high. And I paid like $80 for this, which was normal back then. But this one right here, if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this unit has 52 songs. And this right here is another iPod Nano 7th generation that I got from one of my dad's friends. And unlike my previous iPod Nano 7th generation, this is a 2012 variant. This is a 2015 color variant, and this unit, if I go into settings, general, and about, this right here is also 16 gigabytes, and this one has 263 songs on it. Moving on, this right here is my iPod 1st generation that has 8 GB that I got at a thrift store for $30 last July, and this unit works great. And if I go into settings, general, about, as you can tell, this unit runs firmware 1.1 because I downgraded it to that. This one works great. This iPod 1st generation I got for my 11th birthday back in March 2019. This one used to work, however, its screen now has no backlight. And this unit I initially got on 1.1.5, but I downgraded it to firmware 1.1, and since updated back to firmware 3.1.3, so this is now running 3.1.3, and I don't even know if you guys can see that, but power button on this doesn't work. This right here is an iPod 2nd generation that I got for my 11th birthday back in March 2019. This unit also works just fine. I initially got this on iPhone OS 2.2.1, but I since downgraded to 2.1.1. This right here is another iPod Touch 2nd generation that I initially got on iOS 4.2.1, but have since downgraded to iPhone OS 2.1.1. And this unit also works fine. I got this for my 11th birthday. And this right here is an iPod Touch 2nd generation that I got for my 16th birthday back in March 2024. And this one, I was actually asking for a 1st generation, this came instead. So this right here is another 2nd generation with an engraving. It's just 8 GB, and this one also runs iPhone OS 2.1.1 because I downgraded it. This right here is an iPod Touch 3rd generation that I was gifted for my 14th birthday back in March 2022. And this unit works great, other than the fact that its power button is very, very stiff. This unit right here runs iOS 4.0, and this is 32 gigabytes. I don't know what iPod is going off. This right here is an iPod 3rd generation I bought off of eBay back in January 2021. And this used to run iPhone OS 3. I forget the exact version. But however, this thing has developed some sort of issue when it just shows a white screen. I can't do anything on this. This right here is my iPod Touch 4th generation, which I was gifted this for Christmas back in 2019. This is the original iPod Touch 4th generation I have. I've since installed a bunch of apps on it, a few apps, and jailbroken it back when you could the App Store still worked on iOS 4. And going into settings, general, and about, reveals that this iPod runs iOS 4.3.1 and is 8 GB. This right here is an iPod Touch generation that this one right here I got from one of my classmates at school back in December 2022, and this one right here runs iOS 6.1.6. This right here is an iPod Touch 4th generation that I got in a lot for Christmas back in 2020, and this thing does work. And I apologize for showing these slightly out of order, but this one runs iOS 6.1.3. And then this right here is an iPod Touch 4th generation that I got for one of my mom's friends back in February of 2020. And this one also works, and this one I reset for some reason, but this one does run iOS. I had a bunch of apps on it when I got, but I reset it for some reason. But this one runs iOS 6.1.6. It works just fine. This right here is my iPod Touch 5th generation that is blue and 32 gigabytes, and I was gifted this for my 7th birthday back in March 2015. And I use this thing as my main sort of handheld device from March 2015 all the way until April 2019. And going to settings, general, and about, reveals that this unit is 32 gigabytes and it runs iOS 8.4.1, but I have an iOS 6.1.3 partition on it, which takes up most of the storage on this. This right here is another iPod Touch 5th generation that I got on eBay back in July 2023, and this unit, I just charged it before filming. Okay, it's booting up now, but this new one right here is a 16 gigabyte variant without an eyesight, can't run. This one runs iOS 8.4.1. This right here is an iPod Touch 6th generation that I also got on eBay back in June 2023 and going into settings general. About reveals this iPod Touch runs iOS 12.4.1. This right here is an iPod Touch 7th generation that is gold and 32 gigabytes, and I just scratched the crap out of this thing. Although I hope this should just wash off. This unit right here going to settings general and about runs iOS 15.5. AirPods. These right here, two of these pairs of AirPods are first generation AirPods, and one of these is first generation AirPods. The first generation AirPods, I believe, are either my mom's or my dad's old ones. I'm not sure. And then one of these pairs of AirPods too is my dad's old pair, and then this right here is my old personal pair of AirPods too that I got for Christmas back in 2019. I lent these to my father for a little bit, and then I started using these again back in August 2021. These do work, however, the light on the case just doesn't work, and also the microphones in these don't work. But I briefly switched back to these when my AirPods Pro 2 did go out of commission in 2023, which I'll talk about later. This right here is my first generation AirPods Pro, which these do work. I just don't have the case charged. And I got these for Christmas back in 2021, so as a result, these are the MagSafe variant. These work okay, but they still have their bugs, which is why I upgraded to the second generation AirPods Pro. And these right here are also first generation AirPods Pro that I got back in March 2022. However, my dad found these in the park in March 2022, and they're iCloud locked to the previous owner's Apple ID. And this right here is a fake AirPods Pro 2 case that my dad got when he needed a new case for his AirPods Pro 2s. These right here are my AirPods Pro 2 with the USB-C case. I've been using these actual buds since December 2022 as I got these for Christmas of that year. However, the case is a story that I'll get into now. So this is the original case for my AirPods Pro 2. However, my then puppy Betty decided to get a hold of these when I forgot to put these up at night, and chewed this case to dysfunction. So then I had to get another replacement case, and this is before USB-C case. So I just got this case, which I used from July 2023 all the way up until June of 2025. And then this right here, and then I got this USB-C case because I'm going to be upgrading to the USB-C iPhone this fall. I wanted a case to match. Moving on to headphones themselves, these right here are my Beats Solo 3, and I got these for my 13th birthday back in March 2021, and these do work. However, I just can't really use these because not only do I have AirPods that are just more compact, but also these things, my ears are really sensitive to headphones. As a result, these just hurt my ears too much when I use them. So consequently, I couldn't really ever use these. And these right here are my mom's old AirPods Max. She got off of eBay sometime in 2022, I believe. And these will connect to my devices, but they won't do anything beyond that. So yeah, I do have AirPods Max, but they don't work. On iPod and AirPod boxes, these right here are my two iPod shuffles. One of these is third generation, one of these is a fourth generation. I got them both sealed. The third generation I got for my 15th birthday back in March 2023, and this one I got for February 2022 at a thrift store. And neither of these work, so I keep them up in their boxes. I have the box to my iPod 5th generation, the box to my second iPod Touch 3rd generation, and then I have the boxes to many pairs of AirPods, including all of mine, and the USB-C case for them. I'm not even sure which cases go to which AirPods because I have so many of them. Then moving over here, that's the box to my AirPods Max, and then that's the box to my mom's new AirPods Max. Moving on to the iPhones, this right here is my 4GB first generation iPhone that I got bought off of eBay back in January of 2022 for around $150. And even though this unit's battery is about dead, the camera on this thing doesn't seem to work entirely. But I have since downgraded this unit to firmware 1.0. This right here is an 8GB first generation iPhone that I was gifted for Christmas back in 2022. And this is my nicest one because everything on here works. And if I go into settings, general, and about, this unit was actually already on firmware 1.0 when I got it. Right here is my first original iPhone, which this one right here I bought off of eBay for $50 back in July 2019, and this antenna cover was coming off, so I got this replacement one, which I have to tape on because there's no screws holding this thing on, and the back camera on this thing doesn't work, and it now has some dead pixels. This unit I finally downgraded back to firmware 1.0, and I actually have its housing fixed so I can lock it once again. However, the Wi-Fi on this unit doesn't seem to work. This right here is an iPhone 3G I got for my 13th birthday back in March 2021. And this unit, even though I initially got on iPhone OS 3.1, I have since downgraded this thing all the way back to iPhone OS 2.0. This right here is an iPhone 3GS I bought off eBay for back in July 2019 for I think like $20, back when this was still normal price for those. And I have since downgraded this thing back to iPhone OS 3.0. This right here is an iPhone 3GS that I got back in either October or November 2023 from one of my dad's friends. This one right here is an 8GB unit, and I've downgraded this unit back to iOS 4.1. This iPhone 3GS, it doesn't have a working charging port nor battery because I broke its charging port trying to fix it, and the original battery in here expanded out. Screen is, well, now it's not coming up, but typically it's coming up. This unit doesn't work at all, but it's an 8GB and ran iPhone iOS 6.1.6. And the only reason why I keep this thing is because I have the original box for it. This right here is my iPhone 4 that I bought off of eBay for around $35 back in February 2022. And this unit right here I've since downgraded all the way back to iOS 4.0, which I'll show you by going into settings, general, and about. As you can tell, this is running iOS 4.0 and is 16GB, and I have the original box for this. However, because I was struggling so much to get that iPhone downgraded, I bought this iPhone 4 off eBay, which is a CDMA unit, and it is bent. As you can tell right here, that happened during my ownership. I bought this back in March 2023 for $100. This is off of Cray 34's eBay. But this unit right here runs iOS 4.2.6. Now this iPhone 4 I got back in Christmas 2020 in a lot of devices, and this used to work. However, when I tried to boot it up for these past few days, it just keeps boot looping, and I've tried restoring it. It won't do anything there. I did downgrade this unit back to iOS 5.0, and yes, thing just apparently isn't working now. I'm sure its battery is likely shot. This right here is my original iPhone 4, which I bought this unit back in July 2019 for around $25. And I did jailbreak this thing, even though a lot of the apps I got on here before jailbroke this unit. I did not downgrade this one. This one just came on iOS 6.1.3. Here's an iPhone 4 that I got on a lot of devices for back in Christmas 2023. This unit only boots into recovery mode. It won't do anything unless it's plugged in. And I don't know for sure, but I'll bet this is iCloud lock, so I haven't done anything with this after my initial testing. This right here is an iPhone 4S I was gifted for Christmas back in 2019, and this unit is 16GB, but if I slide to unlock, as you can tell, this unit is running iOS 5.1.1. This is an iPhone 4S I bought off eBay back in October 2019 when I couldn't find my other one. And this unit I've downgraded back to iOS 6.1.3, and it's still stock, but if I go into settings, general, about, as you can tell, this runs iOS 6.1.3. Right here is my very first iPhone, which I initially got back in the fall of 2013 when my dad upgraded to the my mom's little iPhone 5 when she upgraded to the 5S. And this unit right here is an iPhone 4S, which if I go into settings, general, and about, you can tell this unit is running iOS 8.1.3, and it works just fine. And I didn't find this again until June of 2020. This right here is an iPhone 5 that I bought for $90 back in July 2022. And this unit right here, even though its front camera completely doesn't work, its back camera has a bunch of spots in it, as you can tell, and its accelerometer also doesn't work. This unit, if I go into settings, general, and about, runs iOS 6.1.4, and its battery life is also horrible. But with even worse battery life is this iPhone 5 that I bought off of eBay back in January 2021. And this unit right here works totally fine except for its battery, because its battery has like 30% health and takes forever to boot. But this unit right here runs iOS 7.0.2. This iPhone 5 I initially got for Christmas back in 2019. However, it was iCloud locked until I bypassed it in December 2021. And this unit I initially got on iOS 8, but by then updated back to iOS 10, then downgraded back to 8.4.1. But if I go into settings, general, about, as you can tell, this runs iOS 8.4.1. And yes, is 32 gigabytes. This iPhone 5C I got off of eBay back in October of 2019. And this unit used to work, and I initially got this on iOS 10.3.3 and downgraded to iOS 7.0.1 via Nightshade. However, in 2020, I failed to restore this thing on iTunes because it has a motherboard issue, and I've never been able to get this working since. This iPhone 5C I bought off of eBay for around $80, I think, back in July of 2024. And if I go into settings, general. About, as you can tell, this unit is initially from a different country and runs iOS 7.1.1. Moving on, this right here is an iPhone 5C I got off of eBay back in May of 2020. And this unit is kind of special because this unit right here runs iOS 8.0.2, even though this is an 8GB variant. This iPhone 5C I actually got for an Easter present back in April 2019, and I actually used this as my main phone from April 2019 until August 2019 for a very obvious reason that you'll see, which is that this unit is 8GB. This is an iPhone 5S I got off eBay for around $90, I think, back in September of 2022. And this unit is very special because this one, if you go into settings, general and about, runs iOS 7.1.2. This was my old main phone from August 2019 until March 2020. And this, I have the original box for, and this is my grandmother's old main iPhone from May 2014 until August 2019. And this unit, if I go into settings, general and about, as you can tell, it runs iOS 10.3.2. This right here is an iPhone 6 that I bought off eBay for around $50 back in January of 2021. And this unit I do have the original box for, and if I go into settings, general, now as you can tell, this runs iOS 12.5 and has 64GB of storage. This right here is my iPhone 6 Plus I was gifted for my 15th birthday back in March 2023. And this unit, even though I initially got on iOS 8, it was passcode locked, and so I had to restore this unit back to iOS 12. And if I go into settings, general, about, as you can tell, this does sadly run iOS 12.5.7 and is sadly 16GB. This right here is an iPhone 6S that I got off of eBay for around $90 in July 2024. And this unit, as you can tell, runs iOS 9.3, and this is also, I believe, from another country. And the only reason why I have this thing connected to Wi-Fi is because I manually jailbroke this thing and deleted setup.apps. That way this thing, even if it does deactivate, it won't become unusable. This right here is my first iPhone 6S that has this weird discoloration on the back, but it was the cheapest one I could find back in January 2021. This one I got off eBay for $65. And as you can tell, if I go into settings, general and about, in case you can't tell by that message I got, this right here runs iOS 15.0 beta 1 and is 16GB. This iPhone 6S has horrible battery life, but this one right here, and this also has a damaged charging port, and I believe this is water damage, but this unit still works. And if I go into settings, general and about, this unit right here is 64GB and runs iOS 15.6.1, and I even have the original box for this. This right here is an iPhone 6S Plus I was gifted for my 15th birthday back in March 2023. And this unit right here, if I go into settings, general and about, this is a 128GB unit that runs iOS 15.7.3. This is an iPhone SE first generation that I got for Christmas back in 2022. And this unit right here, if I go into settings, general and about, this is sadly just a regular iPhone SE first generation that runs iOS 15.6.1. And as you can tell, this is a 16GB unit. This right here is an iPhone 7 that I got off eBay for around $120. But the reason why I bought this, paid that much for an iPhone 7 is once it dismisses notifications. I go into settings. No. As you can tell, this unit is a 32GB variant that runs iOS 10.3.3. I got this iPhone 7 for eBay back in July 2024. And this unit right here, and I paid like $70 for this. And this one right here is 256GB and runs iOS 11.2.1. This is my original iPhone 7 that was gifted for my 15th birthday. And if I go into settings, general and about, as you can tell, this unit right here runs iOS 13.5.1, and this is a 128GB unit. This right here is an iPhone 7 Plus that I bought either in June or July 2024 for around $100 and something like that. And I initially ordered this thing thinking it was going to run iOS 11. However, the seller updated it on me. So going into settings, general and about, reveals that this unit runs iOS 15.8.2 and is luckily 256GB. This right here is an iPhone 8 that was gifted for Christmas back in 2022. And this unit, as you can tell, if I go into settings, general and about, as you can tell, this unit is a 64GB one running iOS 15.5. This is my old main phone from March 2020 until December 2021 that my mom got back in December 2017 when it was new. And this right here, even though it's cracked on the back, is Into settings, general, and about. As you can tell, this unit right here runs iOS 14.8 and is 256 gigabytes. This right here is my iPhone 10 that I was gifted for Christmas back in 2022. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this right here runs iOS 16.0 and works okay, except for the fact that its battery tech according to this phone needs to be serviced, although the battery life isn't too bad on this unit. This right here is a space gray iPhone 10s that one of my friends gave me back in the fall of 2023. And this unit would work if I put a screen on it. However, I have not done that yet. I even have the original screen and Face ID connector right here, which, yeah, you can tell why this thing doesn't work right now. But this thing does run iOS 17. This iPhone XS Max, I was gifted for my 17th birthday back earlier this year. And if I go into settings, general, and about, this unit, as you can tell, runs iOS 18.3.1 and is 64 gigabytes. This right here is an iPhone XR that I bought back in March 2024 off of eBay for $120. And this unit, in case you can't already tell, go into settings, general, and about. As you can tell, it's 64 gigabytes and runs iOS 12.1.2. And this unit does have a small hairline crack in it, but that doesn't really bother me. This right here is an iPhone 11 that I was gifted for my 17th birthday back earlier this year. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is a 64 gigabyte variant running iOS 17.3.1. This right here is my old main phone from December 2021 until November 2022. And this right here is my iPhone 11 Pro Max. As you can tell, if I go into settings, general, and about, this unit, as you can tell, is 512 gigabytes and runs iOS 15.4.1. I bought her iPhone 11 Pro Max back in March 2020, but this right here is my dad's old iPhone 11 Pro Max that I bought back in March 2020, and this unit, its earpiece speaker doesn't work alongside its charging port, so I have to wirelessly charge this thing. I got this thing back in May 2022, and this one right here is a 256 gigabyte variant that runs iOS 15.5, and it's midnight green, and I have the original box for this alongside my other 11 Pro Max. This right here is an iPhone SE second generation that was gifted for my 15th birthday back in March 2023. And this unit right here, if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is a 16 gigabyte variant that runs iOS 16.0.3. This right here is an iPhone 12 mini that was also gifted for my 17th birthday earlier this year. And this unit, if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this one runs iOS 18.3. This right here is an iPhone SE third generation that I got at a thrift store back in March 2023 for $270, which back then was an insane deal. And right here, if I go into settings, general, about, this unit I also have the original box for, and it runs iOS 16.1.2. Last but not least, this right here is my main phone, which this is my iPhone 14 Pro that I bought back in November 2022, brand new, and I have the original box for it. And I also got this Apple leather case for it back in May 2023. And this unit right here, if I go into settings, general, and about, this is a 128 gigabyte unit that runs iOS 16.0.2, as you can tell. Moving on to iPhone boxes. This right here is the box to my broken iPhone 3GS. This right here is the box to my GSM iPhone 4. This right here is the box to my gold iPhone 5S, the box to my iPhone 6, the box to my gold iPhone 6S. This is the random top of an iPhone 7 Plus box that I got with my iPod Touch 7th generation. One of these iPhone 8 Plus boxes I got with my iPhone 6 Plus, and the other one was the original box from my old iPhone 8 Plus. This is the box to my grandmother's old iPhone XR. This right here is an iPhone 11 Pro box that I got with an iPod mini that was wrapped in a special iPod mini box, and so I just took off that wrapping and left it stock as is. This right here is the box to my dad's old iPhone 11 Pro Max. This right here is the box to my mom's old one. This right here is the box to both my parents' old iPhone 13 Pro. This is the box to one of my grandma's neighbors' iPhone 13 Pros. This is the box to my mom's old iPhone 13 Pro Max. This right here is the box to my iPhone SE third generation. This is the box to my grandma's iPhone 14. This right here is the box to my iPhone 14 Pro. These right here are two iPhone 14 Pro Max boxes that one of my friends gave me. This right here is the box to my mom's current iPhone 16 Pro Max. And then these right here are iPhone 13 Pro lowercase boxes that I got from my same neighbor that gave me this box, 13 Pro box. And this right here is the box to my leather case for my iPhone 14 Pro. Moving on to my Apple Watches. This right here is an first generation Apple Watch that I was gifted for my 17th birthday earlier this year. And if I go into settings, general. As you can tell, this right here is running watchOS 2.0. This first generation Apple Watch is 42mm Sport, by the way. This is another 42mm Sport, but this one's in space gray. And this is also a first generation Apple Watch that I was gifted for Christmas back in 2024. And the screen did not come cracked, but I cracked the screen on it when it fell from my shelf. So now I have tape over it to help protect it, but it still works otherwise. And if I go into settings, general and about, as you can tell, this is running watchOS 4.3.2. In terms of the same model, I have this first generation Apple Watch that is also a 42mm space gray sport model. And this was actually my very first Apple Watch because this was my dad's old one that I was gifted for Christmas back in 2017, but he never really used it because its battery life was so bad. So he gave this to me back in early 2019. I lost it for 4 years and I found it again, and now I have it. And as you can tell, if I just go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is running watchOS 4.3.2. This right here is an Apple Watch Series 1 that I was gifted for my 17th birthday earlier this year, and this one right here is a 42mm variant that's in space gray. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is running watchOS 6.3. This is an Apple Watch Series 2 that I was gifted for Christmas back in 2024, and this one right here is a 38mm aluminum. I think this is a gold option if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and it's still booting up, but this runs I believe also watchOS 6, which is its latest version. This thing ever boots up, I'll show you for sure. This is, by the way, my Apple Watch Series 2 that has booted up. And if I go into settings, general, and about, this right here is an Apple Watch Series 3 that is also a 42mm model. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is running watchOS 8.8.1. This right here is an Apple Watch Series 5 that I was gifted for Christmas back in 2020. And I do have an original Apple band for this. It's just a silicone one. And this right here was my mom's old Apple Watch that she was gifted for Christmas back in 2019, and she didn't like the battery life on this thing, so she gave it to me in 2020 when she upgraded to the Apple Watch Series 6. And this was my main Apple Watch until February 2023. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is running watchOS 9.2. And this is the 34mm. This right here has been my main Apple Watch since February 2023, and this right here is an Apple Watch Series 7 bought used back then. And if I go into settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this is running watchOS 9.3.1. I also have this random Apple Watch manual that I got with I think my Apple Watch series, this one right here, and I don't know what model this is for, but this is just a random manual I got. Around my Apple Watch boxes, this right here is a box to an Apple Watch charger. This right here is a box to my first generation Apple Watch. This right here is the box to my Series 1. This right here is the box to my mom's old Apple Watch Series 6 that is now my aunt's. This right here is the box to my grandmother's Apple Watch Series 6. This right here is the box to my current Apple Watch Series 7. And this right here is the box to my mom's first generation Apple Watch Ultra. This right here is my only Apple TV, which as you can tell by that box right down there. As you can tell, this is a third generation Apple TV, and if I focus and visit settings, general, and about, as you can tell, this right here is running tvOS 8.4.4. And my airport hours. This right here is my Airport Express, which I believe is the final one. I'll look up the model number A1392 to find out for sure. 2013. And then this right here is my Airport Extreme. This is, I believe, one of the final variants in 2013. This one also works, but I just haven't really been able to manage to get it set up because my mom won't let me set it up permanently, as this does have a hard drive in it, as I do have the original box for it. This I know is the final variant. Right here is my very faded AirTag, as you can tell, which is in questionable condition. And I got this back in January 2022. When I initially attached this via a keychain case to my AirPods Pro first generation, so that way I could find the case. However, that got too heavy and didn't really work well, so I just kind of had this AirTag lying dormant for a long time, up until either 2023 or 2024 when I attached this to my car keys. In short, that is my entire Apple collection. So, otherwise, thank you all for watching this video. I'm the iTunes Fanboy, and peace out.